All right. 1AC should be sent. All right. Can I get a thumbs up when everyone gets the doc? All right. Is anyone not ready? Awesome. Let's start. Advantage 1 is court clogged. Civil and criminal courts are clogged now. So the number of cases a courtroom 50 to 80,000. The overall change is 230% increase in civil cases. Number of criminal cases by a substantial margin. Criminal filing constituted 4% of total cases. Respective efficiency and median time of a case skyrocketed 200% to over 7 months. The plan unclogs both courts. The book on 20. A criminal court would be expedient. Judge would be familiar with the rules and doctrines. Lessons not need to be relearned because intervening civil matters for each case. Effect of civil cases because the criminal docket is the primary reason for delays in civil cases. With criminal court case remove the backlog or debate is the best feature. All criminal cases must take precedence over civil cases on the court's docket. The consistency in national court would resolve conflicts in lower courts 3 times as many cases currently. Just your prevalently criminal adjudication may be more depth handling of rulings, minimize poor opinions, maximize precision press in national court, would enhance judicial capacity to hear criminal PS habeas claims and person rights cases stored to our papers. And the national court could deny be used petition to the Supreme Court. The court would land the Supreme Court's burden, which could devote more attention to significant cases. That's key of patent protections and innovation. Ball 10, of course, a crucial part of the patent system. Innovators protect rights through suits. Protection. The court has impact on patent behavior and investment in R&D. Patent-friendly rules are a factor in promoting innovation with inefficient. The court first says it to invest in new products which infringe on patents. So any additional delay or a cost in clarifying rights may slow innovation. Building legitimacy solves the ongoing chilling debate. O'Connor 14 party preference for the courts critically depend on the parties believing the courts can provide them with the protection they seek. If parties not trust the court, they will be more inclined to offer arbitration. Uniquely true for biomedical innovation. Patent protections are key to reach consumers and generate revenue. Anything else, risk invention is dying at the point of research. QS 17 biomed research chance innovation will reach without IP protection due to the cost with development and implementation. IP opens avenues that can facilitate new products, create a viable and stable business model. Investor demand ROI. IP and else companies to block competitors and retain exclusive market share. Companies not invest in products not protected by IP. Biomed innovation key diplomacy solves global conflict. Meraki and Al Dulami in 14. A scientific and health resource we're going to dominate self-power that might generate the favorable behavior of other nations. Together leaders and build enduring partnerships to promote regional global security. Healthcare sector delivers provides research and developments for pharmaceuticals. Biotechnology can play a pivotal role and U.S. asymmetric response to unpredictable challenges. Strategies can use diplomacy and the medicine to reach out. Cooperation represents unique opportunity to set relationships on the more amicable and sustainable. Of course, solves ABR allows genetically engineered solutions to remove resistant genes. Johnson 15 engineered by American resistance products. Argentina saying industrial engineer for a new generation collaboration making microorganisms have a disease more remove greenhouse gases. Host to make biological manufacturing reliable. Synthetic biology aims to tackle antibiotic resistant superbugs. What if engineers found a way to remove the antibiotic resistant genes? Researchers are working to design new sets of probiotics. And time synthetic biology has arrived extinction. Geltman 15 participation of antibiotics created a public health maintenance of superbugs immune treatments. Patients will be thrust back to a time before we had drugs that we are going to diffuse the bug bomb. We need to limit the use of current drugs. CDC considers the primary source. They come from overuse of antibiotics. The major outbreak of antibiotic resistant infection is a potential climate event that public health and national security cannot ignore. The threat to national security. This key environmental litigation. TRAC 14 civil criminal filings are rising time required for handling cases increased by 63% to 26 months. Higher workloads and processing times have consequences because the courts serve as the referee. Resolving conflicts litigation essential when enforcing environmental laws against polluters. Backlogs greenlight environmental destruction, but specializing courts solve. Praying 9 appellate courts will suffer debilitating backlogs with lurking plaintiffs to wait years before a hearing. Delay can be detrimental, allowing projects to move ahead and reflecting environmental damage with opposite hearing. Moving environmental cases from the general docket to allow them to be fast track. Delays completely collapse environmental law compliance. Monkey 4 is the judiciary exhibits ineptitude. The entire government structure is undermined, and the environmental law compliance will completely collapse. In the judiciary provides mechanisms for accountability and oversight. Courts may impose sanctions on offending agencies. Judges have a stone for investigative and prosecutorial discretion. In environmental law, courts provide courts when there is resistance to investigation. The absence of judicial backstop violators will continue to violate. If delays unpredictability or incompetent judicial backstop is nullified in situations of refusal to access persistent injustice, judicial may be essential to overall compliance with environmental law. Extinction. Roads 18. Environmental crimes harm the environment and keep getting stealing security groups to our government's revenue while threatening security, criminal networks, fuel companies, devastate ecosystems, and threatening extinction. Ecosystem collapse, human existence become extinct. The system collapse to civilization. The uncivilization. It affects the environmental crime and forced law. The jurisdiction is not enforced. They cannot be affected. Illicit use of natural resources, driving conflict, trafficking, undermines governance, illegal harvesting, value of 14 billion per year impacts on peace, civilization is threatened. More enforcement and ensure life. Thus, the plan: the United States federal government should reform criminal sentencing structures via a national court of criminal appeals. Advantage 2 is court power. The court system fails to resolve circuit conflicts now, which destroys governmental trust and legitimacy, as well as the uniform legal doctrine. But a federal criminal court solves Slobodan 20. Equality of jurisprudence has declined due to the increase of case laws, because the uniform legal doctrine is sovereign. And sovereign comments becoming less likely to resolve. Half of the certiorari positions were about to deny review the conviction, perceived by disparity, work, mischief, and decision regarding liberty and the government power. Examples include when judgment depart from guidelines since enhancement, and when a warrant is needed, the court fails to reconcile conflicts, ensuring diversion outcomes in there and multiply. The system is less likely to force uniform law. Reversal rates trend upward with increase unpublished opinions, reduce judicial accountability, smaller proportion of cases going to oral arguments, reduced position legitimacy on the bar in public. 85% of decisions are unpublished. 75% were unaided by oral hearings. The situation warrants a federal court system devoted to criminal cases. Collapsing governmental trust amidst truth decay that causes failed foreign policy actions and conflict escalation. Kavanaugh, 18, truth decay, criticizing elected officials, low trust in government, contributes weakening authority institution, polarization, try to decay, great obstacles between partisan camps, preventing a compromise. Low trust have real consequences. The U.S. constructively with allies is a decay of interference, which poses a threat to the functioning of democracy. The ability to reach position in key issues, creating foreign policy risk. When threats arise, the U.S. must make immediate decisions to protect security, and decision could have significant consequences. And unjust escalation could result in true decay. Costs are substantial, and foreign policy risk. True decay undermines effective responses to every excellent risk. Rich and 20. True decay and people that response to climate change, terrorism, pandemic, the fast mention of nuclear war means responding to the threats, growing evidence that people don't like trust in institutions to foresee the future means restoring fast change can be higher. True decay is the execution that of our time. The new court transfers judges from the lower courts, so those vacancies need to be filled. Slobodan and 20 of the court separate into division. The criminal division will be responsible for criminal cases involving federal issues. Court judges will come from the district and circuit courts. Packing lower courts friends conservative backlash, which shows lower policies. Dogan and 19, no progressive agenda can be enacted and maintained without overall the judiciary must back the courts. The proposals Medicare and the Green New Deal have garnered support. None will be without packing with the courts back to the Republican judges. They will be delayed. And a short down look at the ACA. Time the courts as a decade hollowing out without court packing and progressive agenda will meet the end. Judges are conservative agenda of the Republican Party. Conservative backlash reigns in the administrative state and Biden's agenda. And 21, Biden's moving on the agenda by building exos about to run to a judiciary, turn skeptical regulatory authority, and conservatives to tap into that skepticism. Suits are restrained about curbing emissions. Trump will judge to get ready in the administrative state. Biden will face legal headwinds if they expect to pick up where Obama left off because with great libertarians have chosen regulatory route. Congress is filtering that climate legislation. Biden plans to lean heavily on exos and regs. The exos will end up in court. Biden's legislation eliminating emissions will require liberal interpretation of the law. Conservative judges need to curb regulators. Administrative states smokes at security threats. Wisdom Bloom 50. World of threats is complex. The life of them is influenced by aliens. Investigating and punishing broad actors. The direct control governments have is regulation. The random most powerful ways to influence large numbers. The regulations are in effect. Cyber attacks long subject to criminal prohibition. Biological law impose criminal liability. Laws to control the experts attack with military or dual use nature. Criminal and civil rights establish norms stronger than the power to enforce the basic investigation and enforcement to abusive tech passing those who regulate lay back. There's no authorities are watching. Regulation will serve as a lever for spiking abuses. The tech plans more powerful and available. Emerging tech are inevitable risk extinction and outweigh natural threats. Try or die. Bex at 14. Emerging tech risk survival geogeneric gives countries ability to alter the global climate. The risk actually through unexpected effects on the climate or the ecosystem. AI could give us an advantage to nearest or high impact. We need regulatory vocabulary. Species not straight off in the century 1 5,000. Natural race has more probabilities. Opposite for anthropogenic risk. The tech-driven nuke war by exercise post great risk. Bioengineering can overcome natural risk just visibility, allowing pandemics that are unprecedented. Consequences larger than nukes. Plus existential threat. A single terrorist with deploy pathogens to start user a mature and adaptive regulatory structure. Existential risk. AI research is thought from AI and probabilities far from negligible and possible to rely a general risk. Technology is difficult to control much harder than nukes. The small actors cause global problems. Development may be rapid. We cannot manage risk through a trial and error. It's important for government to develop responses. I'm reading another card that I'll send out after because I have some time. Congress is key to both advantages. Nash 21, Constitution invests aggression to create courts and legislate. Article 3 and Article 1 of 4 Congress power delegations limit intervention to create a new court. See Markazi, judicial likes authority. See Cohen's decline. In exception, the accumulation of all powers into the same hands may be tyranny. The C can court extends authority to the Congress not assigned in such conflicts with Congress. With the Congress. I'll send that out. And I'm ready for cross-ex whenever that is sent.
Okay, you're ready for cross-ex?
Yeah.
Okay, how does the new court differ from how criminal cases are adjudicated in the status quo?
Currently, criminal cases are adjudicated within structures involving district courts, circuit courts. The current federal judiciary outlined in Article 3 established by Congress. The plan changes where criminal appeals regarding sentencing are heard.
Okay, the environmental scenario, the Mulkey evidence is from 2004, and it says that delays in environmental litigation will collapse environmental law more broadly. That's from like several decades ago. Why hasn't it collapsed yet?
It's not, no, Mulkey 4 is making an argument, not that in 2004 compliance was collapsing, but rather it is a descriptive statement that when delays happen, they collapse compliance. which is true today. The
Okay, but court clog and like a ton of criminal cases have obviously been happening for quite a while, at least since a year. So I guess what's the brink for delays in environmental litigation collapsing the law more broadly?
I mean, it's our argument. We have read a brink times. The Bogan says that those caseloads are linearly increasing because of the current court structure. Our argument is the more delays there are, linearly more environmental destruction there is. It's not like a break claim, like a tipping point. Our argument is that environmental destruction is more likely to reach those environmental limits, the more less complex.
The court power advantage seems to be all about like packing the courts, which is historically a pretty controversial process. Why do you think that filling the courts with a ton of new judges is going to restore trust in government?
Those are two different scenarios. Our argument is actually going to be that lower court packing as opposed to Supreme Court packing is different. Lower court packing, expanding the lower judiciary, is something that is pretty agreed upon. Our government trust argument is more about uniform legal doctrine and the restoration of legitimacy in the court system to effectively resolve disputes between parties.
Right, but when a bunch of Republicans see that Biden or whoever else is packing the courts with a ton of people, even if it's uniform, aren't they going to like not trust that and probably dislike it and backlash against it?
I disagree.
Our scenario is not about whether Republicans trust the court, it's about whether the public trusts the court as
but Republicans make up a big chunk of the court, and they're probably going to be pretty mad if it starts getting packed with a ton of new Democratic trial judges.
Some partisans might not like that Biden's appointing people. You have to remember Trump appointed a lot of people to the lower court, so this is balancing that out.
Exactly, and that eroded trust in government. Everyone didn't like that. They thought it was uncredible. Why is the plan any different?
The internal link to trust is about people being able to pursue private action lawsuits against the government, and those cases being able to be litigated very quickly. If someone sues the government for doing something messed up and they do not get a result, and it takes decades to litigate that, they do not trust the court. They do not have trust in the government to solve things.
Yep.
I just sent it. It's 7 off, and then the court power advantage, which I think is the second one they read, and then the court clog advantage. Did everyone get it? Okay. Is anyone not ready? All right. Interpretation sentencing comes after a criminal is found guilty. That's U.S. Court of Appeals 15. Fundamental canon of statutory construction analysis of the rights of defendants will be interpreted as their ordinary meaning. Sentences understood as a judgment pronounced after finding a criminal defendant guilty or the punishment imposed on a criminal wrongdoer. Sentencing is separate and distinct from the determination of guilt. Violation creating a new court is not sentencing reform. Voting for precision limits the act misconstrues sentencing reform, allowing infinite fallouts about irrelevant minutia that happens before the sentencing process even begins, depriving the negative generics and links on at best their extra two, which still links to all of our offense. Next off, the United States military should substantially increase non-dilutive investments in research and development funding for biotechnology, cooperate with the private sector to develop biotechnology, including at least fast-tracking patents and granting access to all government facilities and act as an early adopter for biotechnology. The United States federal government should ban fossil fuel emissions, institute national deployment of carbon capture and storage technology. All conservative judges in the United States judiciary should resign. The United States federal government should replace vacancies with liberal judges. Next off. Infrastructure passes now to reconciliation because Biden is exerting political capital. That's balls for Tim. Major brothers in circumstances in which everybody we can move filibuster made himself the center of attention by the bill through on a party plan, but that is a model of many different progress hope will be used on infrastructure bipartisan support prospects are remote. Depends on large part of the intervention will be in front of a unified Democratic caucus. Criminal justice reform SAPS PC. That's MP 1110. Biden represents private prisons, cash bill, mandatory minimum sentencing, and death penalty. Biden will face the same restrictions as all incoming presidents. Government moves slowly time political capital oil limited in the bill is key to combat existential climate change and it maintains U.S. primacy in the face of rising China. That's Grill 46. Infrastructure is important for national security. The largest to U.S. China's global power center effort to strengthen the infrastructure. America's policy must be rooted in competence and home by anxiety, manufacturing, and workforce development to help deal with globalization, and particularly climate change is most serious. Out of the rising sea levels, temperature drops, and migration proposals of the U.S. will watch matches policy units on climate change with actions to address it and zero carbon emissions by 2050. Extinction. That's by 18. 16 cases of minorities in the Charles Travel ended in carnage, hegemonic rebel movies, party catastrophic war, proxy wars killed millions, but pushed to the brink of nuclear Armageddon. The U.S. is not facing rebels and will more peaceful interstate wars have disappeared. Civil wars declined by 30%. The global economy has quadrupled. The decline is expected geopolitical collapse of the Soviet Union and open the world to a peacekeeping phase with overwhelming U.S. military countries that decide to work with the American order. War is unthinkable. Next off. The sentencing commission should set broad ranges for criminal offenses. The United States federal judiciary should defer authority over sentencing linked to parole boards and their authors. The SLC advocated 20 Cecil Logan and 20. If the goals for judicial capacity second reform to target sentencing proposals to modernize regime of sentencing commissions was set a broad range of ultimate decisions about sentencing would be left to a parole board. Next off. The federal judiciary of the United States shall require the clerk of each court to assign individual judges the only civil or only criminal cases rule in favor of the respondent in the United States for security, at least establishing a precedent for a futilely acceptable response to concerns of claim preservation and solves advantage 1 and 2 by removing circles missing court club by Silverman and all 21. Requiring defendants to raise arguments that he foreclosed their cross circuits is nothing to the judicial economy and fairness is fundamental of that administration is not for the banning systems of futile procedure without a futility exception. Counsel may file one distinct brief after another is harmful, requiring defendants to object would disrupt proceedings to encourage defense counsel to include any possible claims that could gain recognition to defendants in the CJS are working under paid have limited resource constraints imposed ceiling bloated arguments about reservedness declines as the number of errors increase the heavily burdened district courts should not have to contend with objections. Just last year filing the U.S. district courts increased by 13% and sharp uptick in criminal cases contributed to the increase in workload spoken, taking longer to resolve cases despite speedy trials. The objective rule in plain error review are meant to streamline the process, but they have the perverse effect of cloning process rather than wasting resources. And next off, patent litigation fails, but decks 3D printing innovation. That's Homer 15. Tech will be the catalyst for regulation. If the tech industry continue to grow with growing benefits out of these drawbacks, no one wants to see ban printer is impossible to enact and enforce. Ban would not be capable of enforcement without any beneficial advances. Would be nothing more than drive attack from gray area to black market enterprise. And 3D printing solves naval power, but only if US can rapidly integrate it before adversaries. That's Friedel 16. Pays the bottle will be set for those who built the fastest manufacturing 3D prints today and will have a lasting effect in enabling me to get the battle faster, arrive with the capabilities and weapons to dominate faster people, faster we will increase potential for innovation, see surface, we'll see economies of scale, never imagine capability ready to capitalize on the defense may bring in the AM voices top words before they started to end them scenario more efficiently in nuclear war. That's Cropsy and McGrath 18. Naval powers the U.S.'s most useful means of responding to crises, running them and assessing into conflicts that could approach record as a China, Russia are turning to naval ops nuclear exchange between their powers is firmly likely to flow from conventional conflict. No aspect of probably more critical to deterring nuclear war than sea power. Next off. Republicans win early prediction succeed at 10-4-11. Study Republican voters are turned out in midterms where Republican leads since 1978 on average of electoral points. Is points where Republicans have an advantage with turnout. There is a correlation between the 19 votes before the midterm and the result. Any advantage in the popular vote, and if it take the House data makes clear Republicans gain ground and CGR flips voters. That's Blair 329. As fighting with the primary is almost easy to deliver from midterm. CGR should be at the top election day. They'll need to legislative victories, but it's like equal of bipartisan foundation and key to the economy. That's Haskins 21. Radical environmental policies have harmful economic consequences. Energy costs make up household spending Biden's full platform costs. Thousands of jobs and raising prices. Wind and solar are less reliable and more expensive. Higher costs are harmful to low income prices. Prices affect everybody in the economy. Every business will be harmed. GDP lost would be $2.5 trillion, 1.5 million American working oil and gas and extinction. That's House 17. Burden of maintaining order from the U.S. as no other country has the capacity to set a goal to build a global order. Globalization is reality. Actors are incompatible with U.S. interests. Iran, ISIS, China, and Russia. The range of challenges is stunning. The U.S. could reduce climate, combat, terror, or disease partners are essential in order to lead effectively. The U.S. needs to put its house in order. The U.S. doesn't necessarily cannot lead effectively, but doesn't have a domestic foundation. And national security requires significant resources. But if the U.S. is economically respect for U.S. economic will increase if successful. Basic chance of success will be growth. And on the core power advantage, people are distrustful of the government. Inevitably, secret law prosecuting whistleblowers and partisanship all proven truth decays. Nonsense of Speaker 19. Aren't we post-truth no retire this cliche politicians always like meeting to Spanish American workforce World War Vietnam and Iraq fake news is not new. The long series by no means confined fake news that took up the discourse proportion of communications for someone present was mainly at criticism and previous to persuasion the word at least surprising unless you were already in a right-wing if you came across with it you would just treat it as what it is and dystopian analysis overseas the risk of emerging technologies. We can't predict their precise effects, but history shows we are likely to manage them. That's LMB 15. Distinction among level 1, 2, and 3 is useful because confusion regarding emerging technical comes from conflating predictable level 1 aspects with highly unpredictable level 3 hypothetical profoundly misleading is a day really better from today's dramatically should be added to a simply reflection of the emphasis that all humans give to the particular area. Apocalyptic fear 7 common major text systems first emerged in the early days of real world over the widespread belief that traveling at 25 miles per hour would kill passengers of the humanity appears at any particular time always doing the fallacies of pity evolution with dystopia. They are a condition that can be successfully managed credit managed on the turn. Biden has broad executive authority now, but the judiciary is beginning to express skepticism system that's just SLC or 3-2. Biden's doing something on his agenda by ruling the power of the executive, December 30 executive branches as the path for president's government judiciary increases capital and regulatory authority and conservatives determined to tap into that skepticism is too soon to know how any issues will ultimately be resolved, but they are a glimpse of a restraint in the plan. Facts of course getting rid of conservative momentum to check Biden. That's what we see. Don't again, and Biden flexibility cause extinction that assures that 123. Many foresee disasters the many facilitated Iraq war will escalate American adventures and he's filled with foreign policy squad with the bomber registries who are architects of disasters in Libya, Syria, West Africa, Yemen, and Afghan reverse troop withdrawals, and many advisors repulsion, Syrian intervention. There's a dangerous mix of motives of sympathy for the susceptibility to ISIS and perceptions of Russia and Africa has been refugees for drone special ops and practices and intelligence missions and credit missions and on the next advantage. Status quo solves the avenue policy allows patents to be approved way faster than NLR and 20. Launch last week, the president aims to set the average patent 8 months faster. Oral hearings will be expanded. There could be a considerable shift in all industry sectors such as high-tech travel and program drastically reduce the process with the two programs in place have obtained a decision in half the time. In turn, plaintiffs' court legitimacy their author the 20. Advantages in federal criminal court accessible but criticism have been numerous generalists judges bring advantages of specialists. Special agents will lose sight of basic fines and develop arcane law, and the 43% of judges direct prosecuted possibility that would increase in a specialized court raises the specter of a system more direct anything than hurt 1/3. Where a similar case will lead to the loss of judicial prestige consequences are not likely, but it will also lead to lower quality opinions in court application of environmental law, legitimacy, and resources insurance failure. That's burn. And 12. Declaring an atmosphere of public trust with lack of political legitimacy, addressing for judicial recognition may be counterproductive. Judges lack scientific resources and agency can utilize in coping with issues of the order. Judges lack authority to render decisions binding on such measures require legitimacy with the court, which the courts lack, and infrastructure access to the warming impact faster. International emitters thumb. Courts have no blueprint for international follow-on, and infectious diseases that don't cause extinction. That's Barrett and 7. National pandemics are allocated cause extinction of 833 plant and animal exchanges, especially hundreds less than 4% were ascribed to infectious disease. Cut the Barrett card a disease.
Good.
Yeah, I'm
All right. Status of everything.
conditional.
Okay. The court power advantage, this executive flexibility turn. Your Schlesinger card says that Biden says the court is expressing skepticism towards regulatory authority. Where do you have evidence the courts are going to solve forever wars now?
So first we can read more cards about this in the block. The
As of now,
first card, the Schlesinger card, is about how Biden's moving swiftly on his agenda, has a bunch of power, he's wielding it.
I'm talking about war power. Where does this card talk about war powers?
Yeah, well, it's talking about how Biden's moving on his agenda, executive orders. Obviously, we can read more cards about war powers, but the important part of this is that the judiciary is skeptical about it, and they have like the regulatory authority he has, and they want to tap into it.
Sure. And so regulatory authority and war powers are synonymous. The counterplan, the first one that does not advocate, what's the net benefit?
Madeline, what do you want the net benefit to be? I think
midterms.
Midterms? So you think if Biden banned fossil fuel emissions, just ended fossil fuel emissions, caused millions of job losses that he wouldn't lose?
The counterplan, the actor of the counterplan is just the USFG. Like, you have to read cards that it would be tied to Biden, I guess.
Biden runs the USFG. He's the president.
Plus, we think the link is specific to criminal justice reform. That's the link we read.
You think if Biden banned fossil fuel emissions, he would win the midterms?
I mean, I think that we can win that other branches of the government would be in charge of the counterplan. And
also the other patent decide is also a net benefit.
Yeah, I was going to say the patent decide can be a net benefit as well.
Okay, and why is that a net benefit?
Because the patents, it's just about how patent litigation is failing now. 3D printing solves naval power. The U.S. can integrate it before adversaries. Like, I mean,
this counterplan fast tracks patents, and you said patents are bad.
No,
why is it not
we're
linked?
saying that it's failing.
It only fast tracks patents for biotechnology, which is a tiny subset of overall patents.
It says including at least fast tracking patents. That's it. Okay, that's fine.
It's about biotechnology.
The elections DA, this guy who says it's key to the economy is writing on Fox News. Biden destroys jobs, raises energy costs by imposing radical environmental policies. I mean, why is this guy not just a hack who's dunking on Biden?
I mean, I think you have to like specifically indict his qualifications. It just says he works at the Heartland Institute. It cites specific statistics like 17 executive actions, full platform, how hundreds of thousands of jobs, raising energy prices, $30,000 or more. Like, I mean, there's a bunch of like data in here that you would have to indict.
Okay. Climate denialist group, Heartland Institute. That's what it says. All right, thank you. All right, 10 minutes.
Starting now. All right, 7:30. I am sending it now. All right, it is sent. Do we have all the judges? Missing one. Okay, order will be court clog, then court power, T sentencing, the advantage counterpun, the commission's counterpun, the court's counterpun, 3D printing, elections, infrastructure. Court clog, court power, T sentencing, the advantage counterplan, commissions, courts, 3D printing, elections, infrastructure.
Wait, one more second, prep. Sorry. Type me yourself. All right, that was 28 seconds. Sorry, 7:02.
Order is the same.
Sorry, can you repeat that for me, Pack? I'm sorry.
Court clog, court power, T sentencing, the advantage counterpun, the commission's counterpun, the court's counterpun, 3D printing, elections, infrastructure. Is anyone not ready? Cool.
Wait, I'm getting the doc.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I'm good.
Okay. The one sequence to stop power impact that causes a nuclear war. No comebacks to the TOC. The status quo solves argument. 1, it doesn't create new courts, so it can't solve. 2, there's evidence says that the new plan aims to reduce to make cases process faster. Not that it actually will. Of course, they'll have an incentive to say will, but no evidence that it actually will. They say it can't solve legitimacy. This slobber evidence is criticizing this argument. The next line in this paragraph in this argument, this article goes on to say that specialization is better because it overcomes the obstacles. This card says say the courts failed. This argument is nonsense. Yes, court decisions are binding. That's what stare decisis means. Also the impact to the other advantages solves legitimacy stuff. There's no reason why this impacts any of this stuff. They say warming. The impact to the environmental scenario is biodiversity, not warming. Which goes conceded. It says it causes the evidence says it causes wars. It causes environmental destruction and destroys our food and water, which are all existential impacts. Yes, disease causes extinction. Our ABR overcomes all the warrants in this card. The core power advantage. Group the first 2 arguments. The stuff about the truth decay. The evidence they read is about post-truth, not truth decay. It's not our external link is about the being able to sue the government. Those cases being able to be litigated faster, which allows the courts to be able to perceive as a legitimate institution, which spills over to other areas of governments like foreign policy, which allows us to act quickly when we're faced by threats, which solves nuclear war, and it also solves disease, terrorism, and environmental destruction. They say regulations solve. This is our argument. It's that the administration say is key to enforce those regulations. If the court is just striking out everything they do, then regulations are worthless. Also can see the terminal impacts to the environment, to the emerging tech, which is emerging, the geoengineering, which solves the warring impact to the infrastructure disadvantage. Is also by AI, which causes nuclear war to increase through miscalc, which turns already disadvantage. Also can see bioterror, which causes extinction. The turn argument. Biden has already struck Syria. He's pulled out of Afghanistan. They have no evidence that he will use war powers, which means there's no uniqueness. The courts will not abrogate war powers. They have no evidence that conservative justice are actually striking down the things that Biden is doing. No evidence that lower courts, specifically key scopes, will solve there. Conservatives still stop it. It can get appealed. There's no impact to anything. They just list things that might happen. No impact to it. They list the last 20 years has proved that forever wars will cause extinction. Liberal judges also don't like war, so they saw Biden that won't abuse executive power here in 20. Biden urged Congress to override Trump and insert itself as against the presidential war making. Biden condemned the contempt of Congress's co-equals. The president will be working closely with Congress not to dismiss legislation by vote to limit the presidential war power making for Republicans as well as Democratic presidents. Obama lead congressional support for the war making of Biden. Urged to argue the intervention in the Aberdeen opponents of the surge of Biden knows the Congress's role. But Mitchell will send that out. The T sentencing. 1, we meet Plain Texas only object our standards in the half of sentencing for slobber, and 20 the case for federal criminal court system and sentencing form. 2, we meet policing includes prosecution, investigation, causer. 11, policing refers to law enforcement of criminal behavior. Policing is through operation of criminal justice, prevention, detection, and investigation, and prevention of crime. 3, counterinterpret only RF solves their offense. 4, counterinterpret sentencing reform includes systemic reforms of the judiciary aspect. And 92, the sentencing reform requires an overall review of the offenses and penalties, particularly the systems of judiciaries engaged in necessary components of sentencing reform. That includes sentencing structure, limiting absent punishment, creates an incoherent topic, only remaining and 58 sentencing requires legislation where responsibility for decision to be vested. Typical proposals have failed. Reforms to sentencing structure needs to be until anticipated pressures exerted on sentencing structures and equitable coercive administration of criminal justice. 5, ground executive courts and states are overpowered counterparts that body every obvious actor advantages unstable smoke and mirrors. 6, predictability to fall to res wording only are sharp defines sentencing and reform which tries to top goal mechanisms for F. 7, no offense literature states federalism agents and the politics are functional limits. 8, no limits impacts allowing changes to criminal court structure only as are F. 9, reasonability defense subset crowd the advantage counterpoint. 1, do both the other links the planks shield the links to the after. 2, the perm do the counterpoint's not competitive. 3, perm do the after any combination of planks. 4, it can't solve. It doesn't create a new core, which is key to all of our the internal links. 5, it links to net benefit because elections. It bans fossil fuels in the economy internally, which causes Biden to lose. Patents. It fast track patent. 6, it can't solve advantage 1 patent or key to innovation. It doesn't matter if they get funding if IP fails. 7, fast track fails came in. 13, fast track reduces sentences. Fast track is expected to result in a dramatic reduction in processing times. However, the data shares the programs do not result in increases in time interaction between prosecutors and counsel as well as organized cultural offset of benefits. Prosecutors do not offer ever defend from the fullest benefits because the benefits missions don't solve by private actor fee the commission's counterpoint. Perm do both. Perm do the counterpoint and links to benefit. It can't solve. You need a new core. Our national evidence says only Congress can do that. This is a different recommendation to solve our argument than ours. Condos the voting should incentivize research into offense and argument responsibility. Dispose solves the court's counterpoint. 1, do both. It shields link because the plans mandated by the courts. 2, do the counterpoint specifies what USOG means. 3, it can't solve court power. Doesn't create a new core which only Congress can do. That was above. 4, Asian counterpoints are voters towards solid steals outground and inflates artificial net benefits. It links to net benefit is fine. Would still take credit procedural hurdles curve servant to the rules of most significant requirements that Congress to replace the constraints and proposed a new rule undergoes several stages of comments involving the Congress. Of course, proposed rules by made the amendment doesn't go effective December 1st. Congress's opportunity to affirm rules are taking effect. History is goes to trend towards multiple rule getting the 3D printing to set. The impact to the Congress deficit. They cannot create a new court, which means they can't solve advantage 2 or any of the stuff. They can't fill vacancies. The 3D printing. Thousands of studies prove that patents are key to innovation library. If 14 patent provides a sense of research in diffusion IBS claims that bolstered by thousands of empirical studies, and none of which refutes a study of 60 country deposits associated with investment overall patents that decreases incentives to innovate directly and incentivize some effects innovation of merit. So and other innovative mechanism empirics go at fucking 13 IP presents a few impediments of research and empirical studies of patents that biomedical the patents are little dimensions to several other reporting impacts. There's no impact to naval power makers in 18. The U.S. naval power will dominate by 2030. Navy will have halfway through the 30-year plan to afford here carries numbers higher than the current all 30 EU produces and the series next generation ship will enter production and use the naval studies signing anytime soon. There's no links. This says it's talking about ending printers, which is not what the app does. The election just said there's no internal link. Their evidence is that Republicans hack during dunking the Biden's XOs. The economy is recovering now. In last year recession bumps, there's no CGR link. 1 is sunk by first step. Producing I says and pardons. 2, it's not the app. No one spends a new course soft on crime. 3, other issues that way will insert a sharp below voters or ignorant rational summon. And 22 and devote very little time to politics and other activities are more interesting. Good politics I thought was outside before going back to that shows ignorance. Basic knowledge about policy with voters routinely out of value precinct views while ignoring the other ways because knowing will question beliefs undermining identity and conflict with political party predictions fail. And 10-6 the 2016 toss of forecast not worth the website. So Trump's escape to many deaths experience that to feel confident Trump's fighting COVID economy unraveling political economy grows violence. No one's telling you that might upend the race. The econ doesn't cause war. Well, and 20, I do not know the econ impacts the war. If the depressions cause war, then would be more U.S. deaths suffered 40 20 wars unrelated to the econ. National leaders avoid wars and long and uncertainty. No matter econ leaders don't really go to war unless they quick and cheap with the success, motivation, and security. Not against every war is created preventative conquest. The econ is though one factor in many over really significant economy and effect of war crossed by that to the other. Dissat because it's just an econ impact the infrastructure dissat. 1-1 pass line, and 4-14 infrastructure faces uphill battles. Dems need to bring their caucus together as longer as the harder to pass presidents have a difficult time mustering support for legislation in midterms. And one said the two bills are used to one either see the risk of support for the Dems are ranked so small. Number and sanctimation wants to bipartisan, but to keep the bills unlikely Republican support progressives. I thought the plan would be small opposed to the 10 billion to the plan is bipartisan missile and 4-7 lower court expansion is bipartisan. This doesn't break with the partisan lines. Idaho issues a new court law 3 court packing conservative justice will strike down by its agenda, but the app creates vacancies which are filled with liberal justice to flow the dock with the progressive wins and prevent the courts from wrecking a 5 turn reconciliation of plan rise of Bill Moyne and 21 court expansion satisfies all standards measures to satisfy some of factors submit the rules to expand judiciary through reconciliation should be attached to expander include budgets and salary. Even parliamentarian ignores this policy when enacted through reconciliation. 6 no length the plans announced after this that Goldberg and 21 to pour cold water on a bill to expand the court said no plans to like the bill. Scratch that card. New bill stomp cyber and 21 Dems will unveil bill which justice the courts and hope silver dead unravel 2 Dems and 50 Republicans have already rejected no link the plans pop and thumber slubber and 20 specialization in courts of 65 established motivations more prevention and restoration on both sides. There's been against harshness demonstrated by first stabbed Afghan Thongs Corgan and 416 Afghan peace anti-war left is using PC and alienated attempts such as Menendez no agenda to make it harder to achieve. There's no internal links and competitiveness, no evidence that there's a bill that actually exists. No good things to solve it. Refugee stump Lois and 416 facing administration within a party by backtracked on refugee admissions flip flop yielded to negotiation key who helped praise. Cut that card at heaped praise.
Are you open for cross?
Yeah.
Okay. What were reasons to reject the team?
Condo agents, private actor fiat.
Okay. On the court power advantage, on the turn, you made arguments about how like Biden struck Syria, pulled troops out of Afghanistan. Why doesn't that like prove our argument that executive flexibility in the context of Biden is bad?
If I'm correct, I don't think the conservative courts stopped Biden from doing that.
Okay, but I'm just wondering what offense it gets
your
you.
link is predicated off of conservative courts are stopping Biden from abusing war powers now. That is just not happening. You've read zero evidence on that.
Okay. On T, the We Meet card you read is a title of an article. Can you give me some
It's a title of
about...
our solvency advocate saying that creating a new federal criminal court system is sentencing reform.
Yeah, but I'm wondering what are warrants that say that the court system like changes, i.e. the act equals sentencing reform? Because right now this like totally isn't sufficient to be a We Meet argument.
What do you mean? We've literally cited our solvency advocates saying this is sentencing reform.
I'm asking you for warrants.
We've read an Ashworth card and Owington and Remington card that says sentencing reform would include changing the structure of sentencing.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. So the Ashworth card says that judges lack broad authority in criminal justice reform and says that they aren't like a sufficient enough actor to propose reforms. Why is this offense for you?
I completely disagree. The judiciary would emerge as a necessary component of sentencing reform.
Read in between that because you only highlighted the parts that are like good for you. The Ashworth card says the judiciary would emerge as a necessary but not a sufficient component of a body to propose sentencing reforms. Why is this offense for you?
Winning this argument is predicated off you reading a piece of evidence that is exclusive of our AF. We've read evidence that is inclusive of our AF. You cannot make an argument that our evidence is not perfect if you've not provided evidence that meets the burden of excluding our affirmative.
But I think you still have to prove that it meets the.
We've also read a Remington card that talks about how sentencing reform includes changing where the responsibility of a decision is vested.
I have a question about that. The Olin and Remington card defines sentencing structure, which isn't in the resolution. Where does it draw parallels between sentencing structure and sentencing reform?
You've defined the word sentencing without using the word reform to provide context. Obviously, sentencing is different than reforms in sentencing. This Remington card is talking about how empirically sentencing reform measures have changed the structure of sentencing, which includes where the responsibility to make a sentencing decision is vested. And goes on to say that includes where courts are, who has the authority to adjudicate decisions. It says that past reforms have failed because we do not focus on administration, which is a independent topic coherence impact.
Thank you.
Okay, 10 minutes starting now. Stock prep at 6:58. I'm just gonna put that in the chat. Okay, the parts should be set. The order is going to be T sentencing, the court's counter plan, the commission counter plan, the advantage counter plan, and then the first advantage. Court clock.
Can I get the order one more time?
Yeah, T sentencing, the court's counter plan, commission counter plan, the like multi-plank advantage counter plan, and then the court clog advantage.
I don't know about anyone else. I've not received it.
It says it's sent, but it might take a second to go through.
I just got it.
I got it too.
Okay, is anybody not ready?
Sorry, I still don't have it. I don't know what's happening. There it is. Okay, let me open it. Okay, now it's opening. God. Okay, now I'm good. Sorry about that.
All right, anyone else not ready? Okay. Reform of sentencing requires changes to the judgment that happens after determination of guilt. The plan violates by creating a new criminal court and packing it with judges. That's Court of Appeals. The impact is debatability, and your topic is getting native engagement, which is a prerequisite to their standards. The app has infinite prep, first and last speech, and unlimited crimes to choose from. Lack of a core functional negative generic means it's tried out of control, unlimited mechanisms, and research division, which is the eternal link to all portable skills. And extra topicality magnifies all of our offense, even if there's a slight risk that creating a criminal court is sentencing, packing it with new judges definitely is, and it allows them to claim extra advantage ground off of an extra topical mechanism on the line by line. 2C, one plain text in a vacuum is a bad standard. A team could arbitrarily put anywhere in their plain text to shift out of every C violation independently. Their own evidence identifies that the plain text requires the creation of a new court, which is what our violation is about. And 2AC2, the we meet is a joke. It's not actually a definition, but just the title of their solvency advocate. Independently, their author advocates for two reforms. One is the AF, and the other is creating new sentencing around a parole board, which is the counterplan that we read in the 1 and C. When their author is saying sentencing reform, they're referring to the parole board part of the article, not the AF. This was highlighted super out of context. 2AC3, creating a new court has to do with sentencing, not policing. We'll read more definitions. Policing is precisely defined in laws, activities of police officers. Clause 14, policing activities carried out by police officers. And a police officer is someone who performs general enforcement or investigatory functions for a police force. Hayward 82. Next question is whether police is a detective or officer or another person the employee of the resource locks on keys and employs to enforce the laws of a police force and has police officer authority. And 2AC4, this counter interprets self-serving and arbitrary. It allows them to say only RF every single debate, then read an F from the arms or college topic. And 2AC5, this counter interprets terrible. It's conditional and has no intent to define. West Green Screen, Ashworth 92. Since setting reforms likely if these 2 points accepted emerge, it's a necessary but not sufficient component to reliably judiciary to propose major reforms seems unpractical in many jurisdictions. And you should prefer the Court of Appeals evidence. Court decisions reflect credible legal consensus in the literature which best accesses precision and the evidence is defining common use and plain meaning of the word sentencing in a court setting that's most predictable because the application of the law is what determines what the comparative literature is about. 2C6, their next counterinterp has zero intent to define or exclude. It's defining the term sentencing structure, which is obviously different from sentencing. It's a legal term of art, but their card is just talking about sentencing as a broader structure instead of actually defining what reforms in sentencing should mean, which proves at least to all of our precision offense independently. The card flows negative because it still proves their accuracy. It says that sentencing is where decision should be vested, which means creating a court might be topical, but packing the courts definitely isn't. 3C7, they say act ground, but neg ground outweighs. It's reactionary to act choice, and they have infinite prep limits. Is prior debate only exists with negative rejoinder. 3C8, our interp is predictable and the most precise. I did that work above. 2C9, functional limits do not track. It causes bad debates. They force the negative to generics because apps are written to beat generics, and they have infinite prep, which means the negative is unable to craft winning strategies. 2C10, limits outweighs their offense. A predictable defined limit on the topic is a prior condition of research, which is a key facet of debate. Absent a predictable limit, negatives become overwhelmed with creating case stakes, and their model destroys limits by justifying reform of a litany of unpredictable processes that happens before sentencing from set 21. A lot happens before a criminal case ever gets to the court. When needs to go over, it takes 3 months. Investigation may include gathering to the club, evidence making, observation, taking photographs, taking statements, and searching for evidence, requesting prisoners, seeking arrest warrant officers, prepare reports, prosecutor for reports, and draft a changing document called double complaint. And 2C11, reasonability is the worst way to evaluate tea debates. It links to limits by forcing us to prepare for every supposedly reasonable act and to prove judge intervention, ambiguity on what is reasonable versus an arbitrary evaluation about what is debatable instead of defining a clear topic on the court's counterplan. It solves the entirety of the case. It has a Supreme Court rule in favor of the current case in the United States v. Jerry, which solves court clog by creating a futility exception rule that solves the backlog of cases without creating new courts by making cases more efficient and relieving workloads. And they have conceded that it assigns court clerks to civil or criminal cases, which also solves their offense. That's the Silverman evidence, and it solves even better than the act. This is a current issue of the courts, which cites their solvency advocate as proof of the concept, but the counterplan is also a solvency deficit to the act. Maintaining claim preservation means their solvency is only temporary and will inevitably get clogged again as cases continue to rise. The counterplan solves that problem at the source on the line by line. 2C1, perm to both links to net benefit. The link is predicated on congressional action, which means that only separating through the counterplan solves and perm undermines solvency. Regulatory overlap creates chaos. Aggregate 11. Regulatory overlap leads to duplication of waste resources. Cost more than to run a single program, giving multiple agencies jurisdiction, creates conflicting regulations, inconsistently undermine each other, and increase burdens. And 2C2, perm to the counterplan servers. That's bad because it makes negative links that counterplan competition impossible. Independently, the counterplan doesn't attempt to change sentencing structures, which means the perm is incoherent. Textually, the counterplan uses different words of the plan. Functionally, it texts the resolution's core word. Resolves implies legislation. Louisiana has to reference 5. The legislative instrument for policy includes the term resolved, and an act is only Congress in 2020. Phrase enacted must refer to the legislative body, not courts. Ordinary meaning denote the official actions of the lawmaking body. An act does not include the court. Be enacted by legislator. The legislator has the authority to enact. And 3C3, lower courts don't matter because the counterplan has court clerks assigned to civil or criminal cases in every single court, including the lower ones, which is their internal link to resolving court clog. And 2C4, agent counterplans are good. Our interpretation of whatever we did. 1, they're key to negative ground and flexibility, which is important on athleting topics. 2, testing the entire app is key to search for the best policy option. 3, literature checks. It proves it's not infinitely regressive. The counterplan is specific to the app, which checks abuse. 3C5, durable fiat means the counterplan happens immediately, so there's no delay. Their card just as Congress could do something about the counterplan, but it never makes a predictive claim that they will, and Congress won't risk confronting SCOTUS. 11, rubber means that political actors want to take the action. Courts ruled on constitutional solving enacted rules. New would be struck down. Congress not willing to assist in all-time confrontation with the court. And 3C6, the counterplan which does not change internal rules, but rather rules in favor of the consultant in the Gary case, which proves their deficit doesn't apply. And the counterplan is grounded in legal precedent. Silverman all 21. Contrary to their run of futility exception, when uniform circuit precedent for closest enough reduction finds meaningful supporting court precedent, lower court decisions of O'Connor v. House and futile exception more viable. O'Connor was one off, so reverse to record review. The court has endorsed the futility exception outside direct review as well. Read appellate courts and the lower courts support the futility exception, both state and federal. Several states Supreme Court to futile objections. Federal appellate courts also seem to follow opposing plain error review and futile objections. They have these clinics to several circuits that follow reading the federal courts, and the courts have jurisdiction to rule to resolve circuit splits. Silverman all 21. Nothing prevents the court from adopting a futility obsession. Good reason and authors support the futility obsession. No rule or precedent prevents the court from achieving the error. The government relies on Johnson to circuit split over the underlying legal issue. Notice an exception would have been futile. Johnson assumes that rule 3. It does not. Concurrent does not. 3C7. I answered the reversal stuff above. Only we are reading specific evidence that the counterplan is grounded in legal precedent, which means that Congress has no incentive to backlash on the commission counterplan. Conditionality is good. Our interpretation is whatever we did. That's the best model. 1, strategic decision making. Multiple condo makes the app choose their best arguments, and the NIC claps to their best policies. 2, NIC flex. Feature is already absurdly broad. I did that on the T debate. 3 is best policy option. Legislators have to evaluate infinite competing proposals, which means that condo builds real world skills. 4 is strat times. You are inevitable. 1 is for full of sets and T. If they can't get digital. All 5 is 200 claps and checks. The 2 only has to enter one option. 6 is dispo doesn't solve. It creates a strategic incentive to read only one counterplan, which precludes testing the app from multiple angles. Worst case scenario, reject the argument, not the team. Concede the perm. I'm not going for on the advantage counterplan. Also also concede the perm. There's no offense on the slow. Private actor fiat is a reason to reject the argument, not the team, and conditionality also justifies it. On the court clock advantage, the status quo solves the after. Recent program allows for patents to get approved 8 months faster. Experts said that it will cause a massive shift in all industries that will more broadly reduce backlogs and to overcompensate for court clock. That's the NLR evidence, and the Supreme Court has measures in place to quickly review cases to prevent clock mission AA. Just commented on the East petitions without merit. Thousands of petitions filed each year, so implausible the justice would have an integrated number of petitions are really better than the asserted error consists of factual findings. The question of whether a case is capable is a matter of field. The question is a subjective decision made up of intuition and legal judgment, and merit is terminal defense against the advantage. Diseases are globally dispersed, which ensures the adaptation of global variants. Checks the AVR scenario when school solves the coronavirus has accelerated global medical research, includes Kirkpatrick 20. Scientists have been creating global collaboration research that shared hundreds of viral genomes and coronavirus response to, let's say, medical communities, been international scope. Doctors have been collaborating for years today, and the information shared decks what was possible 3 decades ago. Chinese scientists have led research repeating the virus pressure across labs and borders. Pandemic making medical sense more nimble after the emergency is passed, and resiliency, genetic mutations, all check until 16. With each outbreak comes a fear of extinction, worry about the end of human traces, our resilience, our species, explosion in life, and the results of control of infectious diseases. There's no reason to expect alien pathogens wage war on the human race. Any apocalyptic pathogen would need to be so familiar that no vaccine could be applied, would have to have a high transmissibility. Cut card at transmissibility. On the environment scenario, there's zero impact. The 1AC pring evidence just says that some environmental cases are delayed, not that delay actually cements environmental destruction. It's also terminally non-unique because their impact card is from 2 decades ago. Delays since then should have obviously collapsed environmental law more broadly, and court fails at environmental litigation anyway. They don't have a complex understanding of the science behind climate, which guarantees they'll just rule incorrectly anyway. I'm open for cross-ex.
Oh yeah. 1 second. Let me turn the lights on. Okay. Let's start on the counter plan. What is a futility exception rule?
So the counter plan would favor the consultant in the Gary case. That basically means that when criminal defendants try to come up with arbitrary reasons to prolong their case or to try to seek like a lesser sentence, which they do all the time, trial judges can just resolve the case a lot more quickly by using a futility objection.
The first plank has the clerk assign individual judges to civil or criminal cases. Does this include expanding the number of seats in these courts?
I don't necessarily think it would need to include that, but court clerks have the authority to decide whether trial judges should go to a civil case or a criminal case. All of your internal links are predicated about how that ambiguity is what results in court clock. Court clerks clearly defining where trial judges go would solve the impact.
Let's talk about T. You read this Fremstad evidence that's like your internal link to limits. It talks about how before a criminal case gets to a courtroom, there's a bunch of processes like investigations, people being arrested. Why does our interpretation make any of these apps topical?
Let me pull up the card really fast. So I guess, first of all, you've read 2 interp cards. I think both of them probably links to the limits offense to a certain extent. The evidence talking about sentencing structure would encompass all these things that happen in pretrial investigations. We also think this Ashworth evidence is just like sentencing reform is anything that the judiciary would do, which would obviously encompass
investigations, gathering physical evidence, police officers arresting people, getting warrants. Those include changing sentencing structure. What evidence do you think you've read that makes an internal link between those 2 things?
I mean, this card is just establishing that there's a lot of different things that happen before the determination of guilt, which means that any definition that encompasses what happens prior to determination of guilt, like creating a new criminal court, appointing new judges, including all of those pretrial processes, will link to the different things listed
So those pretrial processes, some of those things include like arresting people, gathering evidences, getting warrants. Those are things that police officers do. You read a piece of Collins evidence that says police officers are policing. You read a piece of Hayward evidence that that would be topical AFs. Why does your interpretation solve this limits claim?
Wait, I'm confused.
You've made claims that investigations and police activities would explode limits. Then you've read an interpretation card that police and changing what police do.
No, I think there's an important distinction that needs to be made. The Fremstad evidence is talking about how investigations happen as a part of the pre-trial process. So trial judges are like, I need more information. I need a warrant to obtain more information, that sort of thing. No, this happens as part of the pre-trial process, which encompasses sentencing, but the policing evidence is just talking about police departments.
I'm gonna take a little bit of prep for the one on our 702. 520.
Okay, I'll send it out now. Okay, it should be sent. Let me know when everyone has it. The order is the patent disad, the midterms, elections disad, the infrastructure disad, and then I think it's a court power advantage proper, and then the term.
Can I get the disads one more time?
Yeah, it's patent, midterm, elections, and then infrastructure, and then the advantage. Is anyone not ready? Okay. On the patent disad, I can see a copyright and private DRM thumb. If there's no offense on this floor, we're not going for it. On the midterms disad, I can see the first step in policing XO thumb. If there's no offense on this floor, we're not going for it. On infrastructure, concede that Afghan thumb still takes out any of the turns that they're trying to go for. There's no offense on this floor, we're not going for it. On the advantage. Extend pre-incur from the 1 and C. Truth decay is nonsense. This card is hyper-specific as to how politicians have always lied, leading to many conflicts like the Spanish-American War, First World War, Vietnam, and Iraq. These appears proof fake news isn't a new phenomenon. It doesn't heavily influence online communications. People can distinguish between the truth and lies. Their argument that the courts can constrain this isn't true because they would have done it in the past. Extend Allenby, their only argument is that we didn't answer the AT external impact, but they didn't answer any of the internal link pushes in this card. Fears of emerging tech are simply fear-mongering that happens when major tech systems emerge. They haven't drawn any distinction between past tech and emergence and future, or whether any specific reasons to fear. Allenby also proves that emerging tech can be easily and efficiently managed. It mitigates any risk of an impact. Super high threshold for the bioterror impact too, considering there was no real extension of it in the TOC, but the worst case scenario already happened and there was no extension. That's done in 12. Bacteria and viruses are uses of weapons history. Proves for incidents that 2 have failed 1979 anthrax incident killed 100 people. Second fatal incident also failed anthrax from the government run lab 5 people died. That's good. That gives us 5 deaths entirely from each eliminates and officially funded bioweapons labs. Card labs and oh, I put your answers in there. It's okay. Okay. And their answers to the term were so bad didn't allow them to one of our answers, and they didn't extend anyone. I see authors and only read one card in the TOC. Limiting Biden's policy agenda solves extinction is unilateral control over foreign policy causes escalation in numerous hotspots. First is Syrian intervention that causes policy confusion and overlapping goals, which first inadvertent escalation and draws in Russia. Second is Africa. It's a major conflict with escalating troops, special ops, and drones. Biden falls victim to African fear-mongering, which would incite escalation. And third is Russia. Biden's Secretary of State has a hawkish approach that will accelerate tensions. Trump already brought us to the brink of nuclear catastrophe, which Biden's pushes over the edge. Arming Ukraine and ambitious deterrence causes war. That's the sures and evidence. And TOC 1, 2, and 3. Their arguments about the strike on Syria and pulling troops out of Afghanistan bullshit our offense because it proves that Biden is dangerously wielding his power now, and Biden's authority is being dismantled now by the African that's Milheiser 327. 5 members of the Supreme Court have already endorsed a plan to erase executive branch's authority matter of time for the courts are striking down Biden administration regulations to the Supreme Court strips the government of its power to promulgate and can effectively grant on the board of presidency. Congress can regulate business, command industries to conduct the business in a certain manner. Congress can pass laws that lays out a proper federal policy to lead the details of how to implement a policy of it to a federal agency. Long-standing Supreme Court precedents hold that Congress has a broad authority to delegate power, and our cards are specific to Biden authority writ large, which obviously assumes war powers because Biden is largely in charge of military forces. To receive further argument about SCOTUS is also offense for us because they defend the USFG and mandate court action within their mechanism. Proves that the AF indefinitely links to the terms and uses SCOTUS. They haven't read any no-link arguments coming out of the 2AC. 5 extend sures and proves that Biden has inflamed tensions with Putin, started wars in Syria, Libya, etc., and prompted conflict in Africa. You can cross-apply the overview here. And US-Russian war causes extinction. That's Barrett 17. Aftermath, the big worst consent amounts of smoke in the atmosphere and nuclear winter exchange on the scales only possible between the US and Russia, given the relatively modest size of their arsenals or risk of human extinction is possibly averted from conflict between the US and Russia, and conflicts with Russia and China cause extinction as Joshi 18. If authoritarian states can achieve this version, this will have a global standing piece of democracy on the back of Russia is resolved regarding the use of force and hyperwarfare presents particular danger. China has demonstrated assertive behavior. Russia and Chinese behavior is rooted in their ambition for status authoritarian states who are intrinsically more likely to be threatening. And Congress solves counter-terror executive strategies incoherent and destabilizing this fluid and Martin 18. AUMF has been stretched beyond its original intent and relying to conduct wars against multiple terrorist groups in 7 countries. There's no strategy for winning them. Congress has for decision-making. Congress must conduct meaningful oversight of wars in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, Iraq, Syria, and Libya. Trump has an incoherent strategy. Double troops to declare Somalia and Yemen to be areas of active hostilities. He thinks the number of airstrikes and congressional oversight is urgently needed. Endless wars are inevitable. Congress places proper oversight to make an informed decision. Hearings need to be public necessary information to eliminate options. Examination is key to ensuring that Congress is fully informed concerning the U.S. military, current military, and exercise causing nuclear escalation with North Korea and Russia. That's French 18. As Trump party Mrs. Strike, we are moving toward a war making authority in the imperial presidency of assisting to Syria and North Korea, with dangerous escalation, Russia and Syria, North Korea, with North Korea miscalculation, risk of war action, and represent expertise for congressional authorization. We can also sustain abuse of presidential authority. We can protect national security and conduct congressional debate action. Backed by robust debate and authorization as far more sustainable threats, backed by legislative reform of Britain than threats based on presidential action alone. And 2AC6 liberal does not like it war is irrelevant to the question of the term. The unique claim is that the courts are restraining authority now to avoid war. 2AC7 restoring leadership to Congress on matters of national security solves war and executive overreach cause it. That's Streichler and 8. Congress can move to authorize military procedures for September 11. The Senate moved 98 to 0. Authorized first presidents do not always react with speed and executive decisions. Mainly the policy option for the long-run Kennedy's management of the Cuban Missile Crisis has been roundly criticized for the dynamics that come to group things can affect this effect can be pronounced with foreign policy.
Can I go to the doc?
Congress. What? Congress also the structural disadvantage power is dispersed and diverse ideologies make them less susceptible to groupthink and thus provides a forum for public deliberation. XFS is unsustainable in the long term. Do you want me to go to the doc?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And a judge recently limited the powers of Biden and the DHS to limit Biden as much as they can. That's Missile 21. Just 6 days into the Biden administration, the federal court started by Trump that has moved to the president's agenda. The DHS does not have to ask permission from the proxy to enforce rules. Nonetheless, request for a nationwide temporary restraining order holding Biden's policies was created by Judge Tipton. He also ruled the DHS likely exceeds authority by implementing the clause by making the ruling a nationwide injunction. But the executive order did was a test good for the conservative jurists. We'll send that card out. I didn't read the last card that I started. Sorry.
I sent that last fight.
You mind if I pull that up before prep? And the last card you marked, Hannah, was which one? So can you hear me?
Wait, what did you say? I'm sorry.
So the last card you marked was.
I read the restoring leadership, the Streichler card, but I didn't read.
Okay, you didn't mark Streichler though.
I don't think so. Unless
Okay,
I'm wrong.
All right. Start.
I
Sorry.
didn't read Thorpe. I read the one she sent.
All right, just making sure. 520. 314. Sending it now. Oh crap, I just lost the doc. All right, should be sent. Sorry, my doc just collapsed. 1 sec. I'll start taking prep if this doesn't resolve itself in a sec.
If it's a tech thing, you can.
Yeah, my computer just like lost the doc. Do you mind if I take tech time? If that's a thing.
Yeah. That's fine.
Okay, I'll start. I think that's the 10 minutes tech time. My bad. Sorry. All right, sorry about that. That was a bit of tech time. All right, is everyone good for an order? It's going to be court clog, T, the court's counter plan, then the court power advantage.
I don't think Rom or Joey were.
Oh, my bad. Okay, I'll wait for them and give it again. All right, sorry. If anyone didn't hear, the order is clog advantage, topicality, court's counter plan, court power. Anyone not good? Awesome. Not going for the ABR impact. We are going for the environment scenario because they don't read the evidence here. They say that it just says some destruction. Yes, it does. It's a linear question of environmental law compliance with criminal and civil regulations key to decrease the amount of destruction. They can say it causes extinction through ecosystem collapse and the loss of the biosphere. The 20 years argument doesn't make sense because our 2004 car is not unique. This claim is a question of solvency. The Rose 18 evidence these things are increasing now, and more environmental law compliance is key to solve them. The court does not solve. They didn't read the evidence here. It's a question of interpreting the law and bringing environmental criminals and civil regulations that fail to protect the environment to justice. Topicality at the top, we meet because we change how sentencing is determined after pronunciation of guilt. If we do not meet that, proves their interpretation is remarkably arbitrary. 2AC3 counter interpretation. Sentencing reform includes reforming sentencing structure by making system changes to judicial jurisdiction. This allows acts that create tribunals and commissions, but it excludes all the acts on their non-existing case list. That's Olin and Ashford. They can see a topic coherence. Past reforms fail because inadequate attention is given to the administration of criminal justice. Advocacy skills is a portable impact. It means that even if they're more engaged with the negative, if they don't provide advocacy about the mechanism of the topic, which is the important part of what's still 2AC5, predictability is net benefit. It outweighs limits to the guidance period on prep, uniquely true at the TOC when new asks are inevitable. Anything that falls outside predictability robs debaters of work and engenders unfair practice. Subpoint A is resolutional wording, dropped internal link. Only our evidence-defined sentencing reform, which outlines the topical mechanisms of the topic. Defining sentencing alone does not inform how asks reform sentencing. Their card is not exclusive of our ask because we determine how sentencing is determined after guilt, but by changing the structure where that is determined. Sentencing Reform Act proves this. Rock 19 with the Sentencing Reform Act, Congress granted new body change court. It changed court structure. CRS 9, the SRA reform sentencing by authorizing a public review of sentences. Subway B's authority. Our interpretation is cited the Supreme Court case on sentencing. We have asserted proof that's from the Supreme Court. The extra T thing is a misunderstanding of the affirmative. It's an effect, packing the course in effect, not mandate of the F. We think that creating a new structure would create vacancies, and Biden would put people in afterwards. But that's a normal means question. We result in vacancies by changing structures. We do not fiat that Biden puts new people in there. They say that there's no intent to define the Ashford card. The Ashford card defines how sentencing reform operates, which is much more predictable because it says how it plays out in practice. It says definitions that ignore structures create incoherent debates. There are appeals court evidence. It's a matter of qualifications are irrelevant if they don't find the resolutional wording. The OLON card, I answer the impact of that above. I'll do the limits debate here. No impact. 1. Our interpretation adds only a single after the topic. Almost conceded. The only way to change the structure of sentencing is to vest a new court with authority, which means we writing one negative clause. The 2NC gave no case list of what we justify. So all they're talking about limits doesn't really matter because we don't know what we explode. We don't allow any pre-sentencing reform, which is the only card there in this question. Second is functional limits. There are very few solvency advocates for changing structure and fewer that can be the best mechanism or agent arguments. States and agent counterplans solve most AFs. Generics are not inevitable because that's really limited to those that can be generics. I'll do the AFGRAD argument here. It outweighs because it starts a cycle of prep limiting to sentencing outcomes, kills it. Subpoint A, overpower counterplans, creating new structures is key. The alternative is agent advantages, which are all smoke and mirrors and can't survive more than a few rounds. Even if Negron's reactive, it's a question of providing good affirmative. Executive solves everything. Chunks when prosecutors use individualized assessment sentencing. So does course. Blue 17 course. Hold the court affirmative for carceling. Our defendant severely. The neg will not be overwhelmed. They didn't add this case those reasonability. Voting neg on the substance crowd because 2 ends go for T every round. Using aspirational evidence source to live. It's not arbitrary. Defensible interpretation is not. Judge intervention is inevitable. Agent counterplan. We're just permutation to both solves most of their offense. We're going to go for the deficit. The Congress is key. They send to carcers. They don't solve new vacancies because they don't create a new structure. Nash says only Congress can do it because so any court created a seat with lack of authority. That's Nash. The impact is cementing conservative dominance. That's about tech regulations. The rest is irrelevant because shifting clerks does not result in vacancies. Court power. Defense at the top. Allenby was answering the 2AC and tech cause extinction because it's non-linear cascading impacts AI, geoengineering, bioengineering, etc. are all impacted out in the card. And go can see it. The reason that the Allenby card is really bad is a question of how regulation solves. It says that we shouldn't be fearful because human ingenuity will figure out how to adapt regulatory structure to solve. Our argument is the administrative state, which without the AB is destroyed, is the only way to solve those regulations. They say it's easily managed. That's our argument. The bioterror impact events is about non-linear risk. The other ones like AI and geoengineering, which they didn't answer, but bioterror ductile extinction, it can attack solves virulence visibility, which means the empirics are not prologue, means the terrorists are able to do it without an adaptive structure. The Biden turn. This is really, really bad, which I'm spending no time here. They've not read a single card saying courts, much less conservative ones will restrict this war power. Serious try proves they will not, but also proves that his actions are low scale. The card they read are just about solving administrative stuff. The last card they read is about a deportation moratorium. They've read no cards that the courts are going to do anything. Syria proves. Nelson 21 airstrike scenario showed the executive will stretch war powers. And of course, this is a challenge to president's war making, saying it's an issue for Congress. And they can see that Biden will not abuse executive power. Biden believes Congress has the war powers authority, and he wants to collaborate with Congress to distribute proper congressional power. That's here. Their cards are speculative, and when they do not read a single card saying the word war powers, you can't assume that when they say regulatory authority XOs, that assumes forever wars.
Okay, 658.
I'm just gonna wait for judges to get back to get to the order. All right, it's gonna be the court's counterplan, and then the second advantage, which is court power. Is anybody not ready? Okay. It's game over when the 1AR spends 10 seconds on the court's counterplan without actually answering the solvency evidence from the block. The counterplan solves 100% of the first advantage. All their internal links are predicated off of the need to reduce caseloads in court through resolving criminal cases faster. The counterplan does that via ruling in favor of the respondent in the Gary case. The first argument was proved to both. This was literally 2 seconds of the 1AR with zero explanation about how it functions or shields the link. They conceded the truancy aggregate evidence, which says that regulatory overlap creates confusion that undermines court legitimacy and causes trial judges to not understand their role in the court, which is likely to increase court clog, which proves that the perm doesn't solve the app independently. It also links to the war powers turn via creating a new criminal court. Only the counterplan avoids the link through not packing the courts, which they didn't answer in the 1AR. The only other deficit the 1AR extended was the vacancy stuff, but they conceded several warrants for solvencies that definitely overcome that. First is that the counterplan creates a national precedent for the futility exception, which helps cases to speed through the docket way faster because trial judges can overrule defendants when they make an arbitrary appeal to lengthen their trial. The counterplan is supported in both legal and textual precedent. The UNC Silverman evidence is really good on this question and says that tons of appellate courts have already ruled that the futility exception is valid. Second is that it has court clerks assign judges to only civil or criminal cases. The Slobogan evidence is that using specialized judges resolves delays, which the counterplan does through having court clerks divide trial judgment into civil versus criminal cases. You should read their 1AC Slobogan solvency advocate after the debate. It never says that a specialized court is the only solution, and more broadly concludes that speeding up litigation for criminal cases is sufficient to solve without filling vacancies. You should prefer sufficiency framing. 1AC Cross-X concluded that the environment scenario is a linear impact that happens on a case-by-case basis. All of the block evidence indicates that the futility exception is enough to speed up that process and get cases resolved faster. Even if there is a risk of the vacancies deficit, it doesn't matter because slightly reducing the court clog should be enough to improve environmental litigation. On the advantage, I'm starting with defense. They can't win any risk of an impact on the slow when they adopt every single external impact on the turn and barely extended their impacts without answering any of our defense. The Allenby part is specific to how emerging tech breeds fear mongers who inflate the actual capabilities of the technology, and they don't have any distinction about why future tech will be worse than what we have right now. They also conceded that this tech is easily managed, which means they're not winning a large risk of an impact coming out of the 1AR. It applies to the bioscenario scenario as well. Functionally, no explanation of the scenario or the external impact makes the threshold for this impact super high. Plus, concession of the Doug part proves that bioweapons have been used many times in the past, and a total of only 105 people have died. Ask yourself why that's an existential scenario. Even if it happens, there's only a risk that our conceded impacts on the turn should outweigh. Next is our offense. Biden flexibility in foreign affairs causes extinction. He's filled his cabinet with aggressive nominations who are super tough on China and Russia, and groupthink more broadly undermines diverse decision making. The Obama era proves how escalatory his administration can be, which is likely to escalate absent oversight and checks by the courts, which means it's tried to contain Biden. Big mistake of dropping the French card coming out of the 1AR. It proves that executive flexibility will cause nuclear escalation with both North Korea and Russia, which is the most proximate impact in the debate. The card is hyper-specific as to how presidential war making is dangerous. It bolsters a scenario of war with Russia and North Korea, which increases the risks of miscalculation. The Joshi card was also conceded and indicates that China will likely get drawn in as well. It proves that Biden has harmed relations with Russia in the status quo, and he's escalating wars with many of his allies. It proves there's only a risk of the Joshi card because it proves that China and Russia have motives to go to war in the status quo, and there's only a risk that Biden is going to escalate those tensions via his aggressive policymaking onto the line by line. Their first argument is that we don't have any card specific to the courts. This is just straight up not true. The 1NC Schlanger evidence is from the beginning of March and identifies that conservative judges are beginning to express skepticism and they are ready to start rulings and litigation soon. A key framing issue is they have zero defense that says confirmative judges will not confront Biden, but a bevy of their 1AC cards indicate that conservative judges more broadly hate Biden and want to limit him in every single way they can. It doesn't matter if the cards don't explicitly say war powers because they're talking about how conservative justices are limiting Biden in the scope of things like the Department of Homeland Security
security, which obviously has to do with foreign affairs. The TOC functionally dropped the turn, which means you shouldn't let them get away with all this brand new 1 AR analysis. If anyone any risk that the act makes it less likely that conservative judges can check Biden, then vote negative, especially because the counterpoint solves the entire first advantage. Their next argument is that Biden won't use his executive powers, but we're definitely outpartying him on this debate. He does not want to cooperate with Congress. Recent nominations to his cabinet prove, and the Sherson evidence from the 1NC is the best part in the debate and indicates that he is escalating with his executive war powers in several hotspots like Africa, Libya, Syria, and so many other broader interventions, which proves that he has no incentive to cooperate or listen to Congress, and he's going to take executive war powers as far as he possibly can unless conservative judges are able to check him. And another really important argument is that congressional oversight of foreign affairs is the best solution for counterterror, which means that the turn solves their external bioterror scenario. The executive has an incoherent and consistently unsuccessful approach to the war on terror, which is incited hostility, but Congress is able to resolve those and function as a disincentive for counterterror. That's the Gluten-Martin evidence.
3:14 starting now. Okay. Order will be the advantage, the defensive stuff first, then the counter plan, then the turn.
When you say the advantage, you mean?
I'm answering their defensive arguments, like the LMB extension, emerging tech stuff, counterpoint, turn. Anyone not ready? Cool. Massive risk of case outweighs a disad with zero link. It's try or die. Emerging tech like AI and geoengineering are coming now. They will lack regulation and cause extinction. Voting negative condemns humanity to certain death from those impacts. Only the app gives you a chance to establish more regulations on emerging tech, which means it is the only way out of our existential predicament. They have no answer to geoengineering in this entire debate, which our evidence says it causes warming on a unilateral basis, which destroys the environment and kills everyone because it controls things like food and water supply, water cycles, which is an external impact. Our backseat evidence says that these threats outweigh nuclear war because they're non-linear, they're cascading, they're inevitable, and they develop rapidly, which answers their argument about alarmism. Our AI turns all their war impacts, which is a conceded warning coming out of the 2 NRBs. Our backseat evidence says that it causes miscalc and misperception because people think they have knowledge about their adversaries with the new technology they have, but in reality they don't, and it bulls them to escalate conflicts when they have no advantage, which makes that escalation more likely and turns every single scenario. The LB evidence, our extension above, answers most of this stuff. The stuff about fear mongering, you should have a high threshold for this argument when they have no contextualization to our scenarios or any terminal defense to it. There's only a risk that it causes extinction, and that fear mongering doesn't apply. It's not fear mongering because our evidence says that it's inevitable and it develops rapidly. We're citing actual science. They're just citing no studies. They say it's managed. This is our argument. This evidence, their LB evidence explicitly says that regulations are what's managing these threats from escalating. Our evidence says that the administrative estate is key to regulations because they control dual use technology, which will get in the hands of our enemies that will cause extinction. I'll concede the bioterror defense we're not going for it, but it takes out the terror impact on the other thing. The other advantage, I'm not going for it, whatever. Court's counterpoint. There's really no answer to Congress's key to the app because that's the only actor that can actually create a core. We read a piece of Nash evidence in the 1AC that says that only Congress can do so. It cites multiple Supreme Court cases that says that they will not do so, that individual justices have declined to do so, that the Constitution says they cannot create a core. A new court is especially key because it's the only way to create vacancies in lower courts because plan transfer judges from the current courts into the new court, which means that there's vacancies in the old court that would have to be filled, and only Congress can do that because only the app creates a new court. There's just no way it can solve that. They just say it speeds up, which doesn't answer. 2NC Crossix said they do not create new courts. You should hold them to that interpretation. Do not give them any leeway in this. It's a TOC, the turn. At the top, all these all their impact framing is contingent on them winning a link, an internal link. If we win any defense to either of those scenarios, then there's no risk of an impact or any other thing. They have read zero turns case analysis, which means you should have a high bar. The link debate, they're going to be. I'm going to sit on here because there's literally no link in this. This turn has never been a complete argument into any point in this debate and should be assigned zero risk. They have not read a single card over the course of this debate that says conservative courts will rein in Biden's war powers, which is the most basic threshold for considering this as an argument. To demonstrate this, I'm going to go through each of the link cards that they say and cite in the 2NR. The 1NC Scheiser evidence is the only evidence they cite. It says that judges are skeptical of regulatory authority, which is not the same thing as war powers. As it goes on to discuss deportations, nowhere does this discuss foreign affairs or war powers. Using the word executive order is not synonymous with war powers. Those are distinct things. The one in our Millshire evidence is about regulating business by the executive, which is not war powers. The one in our Meistel evidence is about deportation moratorium, which is again not war powers. It's just incorrect that mentioning the DHS gives you access to war powers. The DHS handles domestic issues like immigration, has no influence over China or Russia relations. We do have evidence here. The 1AC Nelson evidence says that Biden has struck Syria, but the courts have actively stated that they will not interfere on his authority whatsoever, which with his authority, because it's a political issue that only Congress can handle, which means that even if the conservative courts are likely to strike it down, they'll just default to Congress and allow Congress to do it. They've read no evidence that Congress will actively constrain this, so you should have a high bar. Congress may be good at counterterrorism, but the relationship is clearly not affected by the affirmative in any way. We've also conceded the defense on the other advantage. It means there's no terminal impact to this claim. If we win link defense in this debate, it means that it doesn't matter how big their impacts are because there's no world in which the app has a causal effect on any of them. Even if they do win some risk of a link, we are winning turns case arguments about why the affirmative makes those words more likely and an external impact impact, which means that there's just literally no way that they can win this debate. The second argument I'm going to extend here briefly is that Biden is restrained now. You should have a high bar for the 2NR's new extrapolation because the block just straight conceded. There's no way for him to get back on this. So 2AC read a piece of here evidence saying that he is submitting to congressional oversight over his authority, which goes in line with our Nelson evidence we read in the 1AR that says that the courts are also interpreting the statute so that Congress's authority, not going all the examples that we gave throughout this debate, like Syria and the Syria ended up pulling out of Afghanistan, prove this argument. There's just no way they can win this debate when there's no link and the AF turns the dissent and they have no inroads to our impacts.
Good debate. Card doc for the judges.
Okay.
The Nate card doc should be sent.
The AFCAR doc is also sent.
We're all in. Okay. Congratulations to both teams, both for a really excellent debate and for making it this far and for sticking with it, coming to do the online TOC this year. The decision is a 3-0 for the affirmative. I don't know, SLC, I've judged you all a couple of times this year and have enjoyed it every time. I think you all are awesome. It's especially awesome to see a team of 2 women in high school doing so well and debating at such a high level. It's really up to you all whether or how much feedback you would like to hear from us regarding decisions. So I don't know whether that's something you want to hear.
We can hear it, I guess, briefly, so MBA can get to their next round.
Okay. In a nutshell, I think this AF impact is really, really big in terms of the impact of the DA. I think the AF is right in responding to your defense and saying, you know, the neg is reading a card that says that we shouldn't care about these risks so much because we can manage them, but the only way to manage emerging tech risks is via the administrative trait and regulations, which fall by the wayside absent the AF. And I'm with the AF that this turn is just like basically at 0 risk through no fault of your own. I think the 2NR basically gave as good of a 2NR as was physically possible, given the EVSET that you had. And I thought that it was a really great speech. But the 2R just sort of goes through all of your cards and makes it really hard to construct a link to this. Also, given that the AF is the only one reading a card, albeit like a really bad one, that is about the courts in the context of foreign policy after Syria. And, you know, so I think it's just really difficult when the neg doesn't have a card that's about the court's ability to check Biden in any way in foreign policy. And that's really it in a nutshell.
I don't have anything to add substantively to the decision. I think you just don't have evidence about the courts having any inclination to check war powers, which lowers the risk of the DA to essentially 0. But I do agree with Nina that you all debated very well given the quality of your evidence. Like on a technical level, I thought you all were incredibly proficient and should be, you know, happy with how you performed at the TOC.
Yeah, I agree. Just no link to DA, risk of the case thing. Counterplan doesn't solve it, but ditto. Well debated and enjoyed judging you all, and best of luck if you're debating in college.
Thank you all.
for judging, and good luck, MBA.
Good luck, MBA.
Yeah, great,
Thank you.
great debate.
Good debate, everyone.
Enjoyed hitting y'all twice this tournament. All right, thank you all for
Yeah, it
judging.
was fun.